What's going on, folks? Okay, so today we are going to be reviewing Bleach Volume 4, and this will be filled with spoilers. So, as I always say, if you have not read it yet, do that before you watch this so we can have a discussion in the comments. Let's get right into it. Okay, so this volume starts off with Kon, the mod spirit, inside of the teddy bear, and basically he's being abused by Ichigo. He's dirty, and Ichigo takes him and he's beating him outside the window against the house. And he's just like, "Is this the way that you treat me?" And then Rukia is just like, "Oh, I know a better way." And Khan is just like, "Oh, I knew you would come to my rescue." And then she's standing there with the broom, and then she steps on him and then starts beating him with the broom. So he didn't have it any better with Rukia. So now he's pretty much trying to find a better place to go. He said he doesn't need to take this treatment. He'll find someone who's going to love him unconditionally. And he goes off on his adventure. So he goes off on this adventure looking for the one. And then he hears a voice and he's just like, "Is that?" And then he sees Orihime. And she's just jumping up. And of course, everything's accentuated. And he's just like, "I knew I'll find her. I'll go out on the field and I'll play this little role." And it didn't work out, obviously. They were playing this game. It's like soccer football, soccer baseball. She kicks Tatsuki. It's Tatsuki and Orihime. Tatsuki kicks the ball and kicks Kon on the ball. And then Kon gets hit by the bat along and then just gets launched off into the air. So that was a mistake on his part. It did not play out the way that he thought. And then he ends up in another scenario to where he's trying to lay down on the street, in the middle of the street, and seeing if any of those three girls are going to pick him up. They end up stepping on him. And when they step on him, basically he makes a noise, and then they just stop, and they were just like, "Did that teddy bear just make a noise?" And he looks up and just like, I think they heard me. I'm gonna run for it." He takes off running, and they're just like, "We're not gonna let that thing get away." And he thinks he's in the clear, but then of course one of those girls is on the track team and has the record for the 100 meter. And she chases after Kon. And he's just like, "Why are all of Ichigo's friends insane?" Basically. So they show a clip of him running past an alleyway and looking across and seeing Chad. And then on the next clip, you see Chad and this girl chasing after him. And he's just in this terrible situation. He ends up getting away from them somehow. He ends up back at the house. And then finally, he gets some relief. And you see Yuzu comes, "Oh, let me clean you up." And Yuzu takes a bath with them, clean him up, and then sets him on the bed. And he's just in heaven. And all of a sudden, she zips him up in some type of like little doll costume. And he's just like, "Okay, this is not what I thought." Renames him like Boston, I think she said. And then staples a freaking flower to his ear. And he is in so much agony. And then he runs back to Ichigo and said, "I'll never leave again." So that's his little part. That was a good segment. That was a good entry point for me into it. And it made it, once again, I love the humor. I love the comedy in it. It didn't necessarily build on the whole entire theme of it, of the whole entire manga series, but it did add humor to it, and it did show how Kon is pretty much going to be just the comedic relief for this whole entire series. Now, going into the next chapter, we start to get into this character called Don Kananji. I'm going to butcher that name, so just forgive me for that one. Don Kananji. And he's this celebrity, basically, and he exercises spirits, but we see him doing it on television, so we believe that he's a fake while we're looking at it. But everybody is crazy about this guy, but Ichigo does not believe in him. He believes he's a fraud, but his whole family, they're doing this thing. It's just like something. They make a statement and say something, but his whole family's crazy about it. And then he goes to school, and everybody at school is crazy about it. Even Rukia gets in on the action. It's hilarious. But Ichigo ends up realizing that now he's actually going to come to the town. So there's this huge thing that's going to happen. He's going to exorcise his spirit at the hospital, and they're making a big event out of it. So everybody's there. Everybody goes to the hospital, and Rukia and Ichigo senses the spirit that's there, and so does, it seems like, some of his other classmates. They sense this other spirits that's there. So we get a little bit more depth on these spirits. We get to see that there's different types of spirits and how they end up becoming hollows. So basically, you have a spirit that has their chain still attached to them, and their hole isn't completely open yet. It's them holding on to some type of regret, whether it can be holding on to a regret for a specific person or holding on to a regret because from a specific place or attached to a specific place. And with those two different types of regrets, you get two different types of spirits that they'll turn into. So I don't remember the names, but you get the two different types of spirits. So we're getting just more depth into that there's a multitude of types of spirits inside of this whole entire world. And also that the spirit won't necessarily change into a hollow yet until their chain is pulled and completely open, or the hole in their chest is completely open. And they still have their consciousness now, but they become, what did it say? They become they lose their consciousness and becomes masses of raging instinct, basically. So that's when you see, like, in the earlier volume where not Tatsuki, but Orihime's brother that turned into a hollow still kind of had some consciousness to him once he would have that conversation, and he kind of broke free for a little bit, but he knew that he would lose his consciousness again. So it's like they can kind of fight it, it seems like, if the bond is strong enough, but not necessarily all the time, I'm assuming right now. So we know this whole thing, this spirit, and this is like a funny thing. Rukia and Ichigo is looking at the spirit and just like, okay, he's holding on to something. We don't know what it is yet. And then he blurts out just like, this hospital's mine. This shouldn't go to this person or that person. And it's just like, really? Yeah. Obviously, he's selfish and he wish he didn't. Yeah, okay. This guy's an idiot. But we see what he's attached to. It's the hospital, obviously. So, then everybody shows up. Don Kananji shows up as well. And then he starts to try and exorcise the spirit. So he actually can see the spirit. And it's crazy because, once again, we're thinking that he's a phony. If you look into it, we're thinking that he's a phony. But now we know that he can actually see the spirit. But he pokes his staff, or whatever he calls his staff, we're just going to call it a staff, into the spirit. And he's making it worse. And the spirit's screaming out. And Rukia had just said that it will take an extended period of time before the spirit turns into a hollow, unless something happens. And sure enough, Don Kananji comes in, savior, but actually making the situation terribly worse. And then Ichigo is just like, what are you doing? And he's trying to run and beeline to Don Kananji to stop him. But of course, there's a barrier around what's happening because there's a whole show going on for Don Kananji. And Ichigo gets tackled by security and he can't break through. Rukia gets tackled by security. She can't get to Ichigo to turn him into a Soul Reaper form. And now they're stuck. And then all of a sudden, Kasuki pops up, hat and clogs, what Ichigo calls him, pops up, hits Ichigo in the head, lets him get into his Soul Reaper form. And now Ichigo's free to like chase after Don Kananji and get him and try and figure out how to stop him from turning this spirit into a hollow. And then Rukia and Katsuki has a conversation just like, what are you doing here? Just like, it seems like Rukia is just like, you're always up to something, so why are you actually here? And at this point, he's still a mystery to us. Like, we don't know what Katsuki's intent actually is. At sometimes we believe it's genuine and it's for the good, but we don't actually know if he's just out for himself. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation going on around him. But while that hollow, that spirit, still not a hollow yet, is screaming out, we see Karin, her stomach gets upset. That happened earlier on in the other volumes. And then we see Tatsuki's just like, what is that noise? And then she could actually see like a little blur. And then Orihime and then Chad. So we're figuring out a lot of people, I don't know if their spirit are becoming like more, I don't know what it is yet. I'm not sure. But I'm betting on some of them are going to have powers that are going to be expressed later on down the line. So Ichigo gets to Don Kananji, but not in time, ends up ripping the hole open, but then all of a sudden it disappears. But then it pops back up on top of the hospital, and it turns into this hollow that we see on the panels. And then a battle ensues between Don Kananji, Ichigo, and this hollow inside of the hospital in order to get him away from the actual public that's out there at the event right then and there. Mind you, everybody saw Ichigo and what he was doing, except for like when he got into his spirit soul reaper form. So they're in there, and Ichigo's trying to this whole entire time trying to get Don Kananji away from this hollow because Don Kananji thinks he can battle this hollow, but Ichigo actually ends up getting trapped because he has his sword in this small space and his oversized Zanpaku 2. I think I said that right. I hope I got that right. Just trying to think really quickly off the top. But it gets stuck in the ceiling. Ichigo actually had to rely on Don Kananji to stop him from attacking Ichigo with his staff. And then he uses this little spell, and you see this little line go up to Ichigo's his Soul Reaper weapon, and you're just like, okay, this is gonna be embarrassing. And then it actually busts his Soul Reaper weapon loose, and Ichigo's surprised, and we're all actually surprised. And then he actually ends up like slashing the hollow, and then also trying to get Don Kananji out of there again. But he's like, I can't run. And then he explains this whole entire thing that people look up to me. I'm a symbol and all of this other stuff. And Ichigo's just like, oh, you can't fight. You cannot win against these things. They end up getting the hollow upstairs, away from, well, the hollow actually gets slashed and then gets out and then gets up on top of the hospital. And they end up getting up top of the hospital as well. And then the fight goes down. And then Ichigo ends up cleansing the hollow's spirit. And then Don Kananji realizes what has happened and what he's done. And then he's feeling down for himself. But he already told Ichigo how he's a symbol for the people. And he can't give up. He can never give up. And he was cheering Ichigo on the whole entire battle. And it was just a whole entire funny sequence. If you've read it, like, I would definitely go back and read it again because it is a funny sequence. And so once Ichigo basically cleanses the hollow and Don Kananji realizes what he's done, he's feeling down about himself. And the helicopter actually shows him there. And Ichigo's just like, hey, get up. Remember, you're a symbol, and, show your fans, you're like who you are. And it shows maturity on Ichigo's part because he understands, right? Like, he understands the guy that he was a symbol and everything. So that was a cool little thing for Ichigo to do there. But it's still, and then Don Kananji is just like, I want you to be my number one pupil, or you are my number one pupil, or something like that. And Ichigo's just like, what? I'm not your pupil. You did nothing. I'm the one who cleansed his spirit. But that whole entire scenario went down. That was hilarious. So kind of fast forwarding, like, we go to now that's over with. They're in trouble. They're back at school. Ichigo, Orihime, Tatsuki, Chad, everybody's at school, and they're getting blamed for what happened, for Ichigo's actions. And they're just like, you were all with them. And then Ichigo's getting scolded, and everybody's trying to hop out of the window. And they actually get away and run away from the guy that's pretty much trying to scold them in school. And it was a whole entire funny situation scenario that went down. So they get away, they get out, and they're all talking. And then you kind of get this scene with Orihime, just like, what just happened will actually change the way things end up. So it's foreshadowing that, okay, this is the catalyst for, I guess, everyone to start to show their potential, maybe. Like we saw with Ichigo. Don't know. But then we get to see this whole entire scenario play out where Ichigo and Rukia, they keep going to scenes but where hollows are supposed to be, but they keep missing the action for some apparent reason, and they feel like it's false, that they're getting false calls and something's wrong with the cellular. I say cellular device. The pager is what they called it. The pager. They think something's wrong with that. But come to find out, they actually have been being a little late to the party because Uryu, Uryu, what is his name? I want to get it right. Let me see. Uryu. We're gonna call him Uryu for now. Uryu. Uryu is another person that pops up, and he's been stalking them while they've been trying to chase around these spirits. And he pops up at the last minute and said, "I am Uryu, and I hate Soul Reapers, and I'm a Quincy." And that is where we end off. But we also got to see right before the hand, he has some type of spirit bow. Looks pretty freaking cool. The spirit bow that he uses to defeat the Hollows. And then that's where we leave off on that volume. So now we're getting into a whole new character. We see somebody else with spirit energy powers, and we also get the kind of foreshadowing lead into other people's powers or potentials being unlocked as we continue to go into this series. So that was volume 4. I cannot wait to talk to you about volume 5. All right, folks. So leave your comments down in the comments section about what you enjoyed about volume 4, anything that I may have missed. And then also just what was the funniest part for you in volume 4 as well. See you in the next video.